Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution. And today I'm going to talk about radical responsibility. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream." He didn't say, "I have a protest. I have someone that I want to blame." He had a dream. He had a dream that everybody would be judged on their character. And today we have this interesting culture that has replaced dreams with outrage. So I want to take you back for a second because I did a podcast right around Easter time that Easter is a lie. We as humans, especially if you're young, you don't know why you do the things that you do. You don't know why we have celebrations. You don't know the etymology of something. So I want to talk about May Day because May Day was last Friday. It's now May 4th. When I was growing up, May Day meant something, well, at least to me, very different, even though it had started to shift into something else. It wasn't about protests. It wasn't about political messaging. It wasn't about organized outrage. It was about life, which I talk about nature and life so much on this channel. And I love it because we're in spring, but it was about spring. It was about growth. It was about fertility and celebration. It actually comes from the roots of the Roman festival of Floralia, which honored the goddess of Flora, and the Celtic fire festival of Beltane. It was actually about the return of life after winter. People were dancing. They gathered flowers. They celebrated possibility. It was about creation. But somehow, along the way, it was hijacked. And boy, oh boy, was it hijacked on Friday. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But this is where the hijacking began. It shifted and it began to be repurposed into something entirely different. By the late 1800s, it became tied to labor movements, to protest culture, to collective grievances. And now we're watching it evolve into something even more concerning. Because what we're seeing today, come on, it's not organic. It's interesting because we've been told these grassroots protests, which they seem to be popping up for decades now. I mean, I'm not talking about just today. I'm talking about for decades now. This has been happening. I remember back in the day when I was a hippie and in the 60s, actually, we were protesting to legalize marijuana, which I think is so hilarious. You're not going to get a billionaire to back you protesting to legalize marijuana, but I digress. Here's the thing is if you start peeling back the layers, because protests aren't protests anymore. They're organized rebellion. But when you start peeling back these layers, you find something really interesting. There are hundreds of organized groups and billions in funding, coordinated messaging, identical signs. And what's funny is, as I said, as a hippie, we didn't have any identical signs. You have to go back and look at some of the images of protests in the 60s. They were a lot different because nowadays protests, they're not spontaneous. They're orchestrated. And frankly, if I've gone to these protests and asked people, do you know why you're protesting? They have no idea. It's that group think, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But here's where it gets even more ironic. The very people being told to protest billionaires, this is so key, are being mobilized by billionaires. Come on, think about this. I think it's so hilarious. And one of the things that I am so adamant about is being integrity with yourself, but more importantly, not to be a hypocrite. And so recently I was on stage talking about very similar ideas, taking micro courageous acts. And I was
appalled that I was telling people to do that when I looked at the video of myself standing on stage and I feel like I'm so fat. Now, that's a different conversation, but I knew that I was being hypocritical because I wasn't living in my own integrity. But here's what I see with these protests, which I think are so funny, is that people are out protesting capitalism. And we live in the consumer society of the world. So they're out protesting capitalism, holding iPhones, wearing mass produced clothing, driving cars built by entrepreneurs that are all billionaires. Think about it. They're out there with their iPhones. Who created the iPhone? Steve Jobs, who died as a billionaire. Who the company now, Apple, is a $1 billion company. It's so hilarious that we speak out of multiple sides of our mouth. But when you're participating in a system while you're condemning it, that's sheer hypocrisy. And when you understand that these organized protests are paid for by billionaires, and the billionaires that are actually goading you to get out there, come on, I can name them all, but you know who they are. I think you know who they are. But that's not clarity. That is not clarity. That's confusion. And it's hypocrisy at the deepest, deepest level. So here's a deeper issue. And this is where I care about this because it isn't about, it's not the protest itself. Listen, people are going to do that, but it's the mindset behind it. It's the mindset behind it. It's the belief behind it. Because when you believe, that's why this podcast is called Radical Responsibility. When you believe that someone else is responsible for your life, when you believe that someone else owes you something, when you believe that someone else should fix your situation, you step out of power and into victimhood. And so when I was watching this on Friday, I thought, this is reminding me about Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. And if anybody can talk about this, he's a man who lived through one of the most horrific human experiences imaginable. And what did he say? The one thing that cannot be taken from you is your ability to choose your response, not your circumstances, not your environment. Yes, the world is crazy, but your response, because this is radical responsibility. And he has this famous quote in a book. It's a little heady and a little deep, but he says, freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. No wonder I love him so much. He goes on to say, in fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. How brilliant is that? A statue of responsibility. So he was constantly sharing how freedom is about responsibility for your own personal life. And what's fascinating about Viktor Frankl is a lot of people don't know that right after high school, before he was interned in a concentration camp, he was the president of the Social Democratic Party of Austria, the youth movement for high school students, which ended up being the Socialist Democratic Party of Austria. But here's the thing. This is what I see more and more of the youth here. Like they just want to get on the bandwagon of somehow or another socialism is this great, the mother lode. But he's also a very smart guy. And he was so quickly kicked out when he began to insist that meaning was the central motivational force in human beings. When we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves and find meaning within suffering and turning it into triumph. So Friday, there were these May Day protests across the globe, all over, thousands falling into this group think. And group think is not looking within. It's not looking at yourself. It's mob mentality. It's following the loudest voice. And my favorite, following the crowd, which I never do. Following whatever narrative is trending. because that's what this is. Everything is about clicks and social media and charging you up, not remotely considering what the meaning of your individual life is. And that reminded me then of Simon Sinek, who did a TED Talk that I watched years ago, where he talks about the law of diffusion of innovation, how we as humans are frankly afraid to take risk. Yep, that's you. He shows how innovation takes place, those who create it and those who are followers. And the sad news is that innovators make up about 2.5%. And the thing is, who are the innovators? The billionaires. They just are. Where would we be without streaming, without iPhones, without AI? Those are the innovators that have made up the 2.5% of creating the life that we live today. And then only about 13% are the early adopters. So think about it. When you first heard about AI, what was your first reaction? Oh no, I don't want any of that. I don't want to be around. This is going to change the world. This is going to take over the world. AI is going to take over everything. But that's the same conversation that we've been having about everything from electricity to cars to every innovation that's ever taken place. But only 13% of the population will be on board. And the rest, you fall into three categories called early majority. In other words, oh, I've seen 15% of people going for it. Maybe I should get on board. But here's the bigger problem is that we have the late majority and, as Simon put it, this isn't my word, the laggards. And this is the truth. Most people live in the late majority and laggard categories. Why? Because they are afraid. And it's not a courageous act to protest in a group think, of mob mentality. Those aren't the leaders. You're following followers because they're threatened by innovators. Innovation requires something most people avoid. And that's what I want to talk about today. Courage. This is where we bring it all home because this isn't a political conversation. It's not. It's a personal one. It takes zero courage to join a crowd. Literally, it takes nothing. You just go along. It doesn't take any courage to repeat a narrative. And it absolutely takes zero courage to blame someone else for your life. You are in charge of your life every minute of every single day. It takes so much courage, immense courage, to say, I am responsible for my life. I am responsible for my life. It takes courage to say, I will create something different that I know for me, not for the group think, not for the headlines, not for the clickbait. I will create something different in my own life. I will make different decisions. I will make radically responsible decisions about my personal life, not everybody else's. It takes immense courage to say, I will not outsource my power because your power cannot be taken away from you. You already have it in spades. You can protest all day long and your life will not change one bit. But one act of courage, one decision to build something, to burst something, to change your internal beingness, to change your own habits, to own something, to create something in your life, not the group mob mentality. The thing that changes everything is what Viktor Frankl knew, Martin Luther King knew, is what freedom truly is. Because we all talk about freedom like it's something that was given to us by somebody else. It's not. It's something we have as an inalienable right. You have it the day you are born. You have the right to think independently, not in group think. You have the right to choose your path for your life, not for the group life. And you have the right to pursue your version of happiness. to be joyful every day, to stop playing a victim, stop believing that somehow or another you are less than or being treated less than because of somebody else. That is an internal thought process. It is not the truth. That already is yours, all of it. No protest required. So let me ask you this real question. Are you going to live your life reacting to the world? Or are you going to create your life from within and take radical responsibility for every choice that entails? Because one leads to noise, the other one leads to power, power within, which is the only power that truly exists. You don't change your life by joining a movement. You change your life by leading yourself. Radical responsibility isn't always comfortable, but neither is living a life that you didn't choose, which is what you do every day that you call out your victimhood, that somehow or another you are being oppressed by something outside of you. Pick up Victor's book and see. He was under the worst circumstances anybody could ever imagine. And he knew that he always had freedom within him. He always knew that that power was inside of him. He always knew that his choices were within him, not somebody else. So, May Day, let's celebrate springtime, renewal, fertility, and the beauty and wonder of nature, rather than spinning our wheels and wasting our very precious time on this planet Earth by going into a protest. Stand up for your own power in your own life. No one is going to do that for you. The group won't. You have the power within you.